Here's what just happened. Iran's foreign minister posted a message this morning declaring the Strait of Hormuz, the single most important shipping choke point on the planet, completely open for commercial vessels. Donald Trump saw it and immediately posted in all caps, "Iran has just announced that the Strait of Iran is fully open and ready for full passage. Thank you." He called it the Strait of Iran. Iranian social media users started mocking him for it. And here's the part that almost nobody is talking about clearly. The Strait of Hormuz was already open before this war started. It was open before a single American bomb fell on Iran back in late February. Trump launched a war, the strait got closed, oil prices shot above $107 a barrel, Europe is now reportedly 6 weeks away from running out of jet fuel, thousands of people have been killed, and now the strait is reopened, under conditions set entirely by Iran. This is the story that will define the Trump presidency's legacy and foreign policy. And today, we're going to break it down completely. No spin, just facts, in order, and then my honest opinion at the end. Stay with me. Let's make sure everyone is on the same page geographically and economically before we go any further. The Strait of Hormuz is a narrow waterway, at its narrowest point, just 21 miles wide, that sits between Iran to the north and Oman and the United Arab Emirates to the south. It connects the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman, and then to the open Indian Ocean. In normal times, roughly 20% of the world's traded oil passes through this strait. That's about 17 to 21 million barrels per day. It also handles around 20% of the world's liquefied natural gas, LNG. The fertilizer trade, the helium trade, even more of those pass through it. If you heat your home, drive a car, or eat food that required fertilizer to grow, the Strait of Hormuz touches your life. Before February 28th of this year, 138 vessels transited this strait on an average single day. It was one of the busiest, most carefully managed shipping lanes on Earth. Then the United States and Israel launched what the U.S. military called Operation Epic Fury, a massive air campaign against Iran that killed Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei and dozens of other Iranian officials, destroyed military targets, and struck civilian areas. Iran's response? It did what it had threatened to do for decades. It closed the strait. The IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, began issuing VHF radio transmissions to every vessel. Passage is not allowed. They attacked 21 confirmed merchant ships. They reportedly laid sea mines. Major shipping firms pulled out entirely. By mid-March, the number of verified transits had dropped by over 90%. The historical average of 138 ships per day, down to single digits on some days. Oil prices surged to over $107 a barrel, a 40% jump from before the war. Countries across Asia began rationing fuel and cutting industrial production. The International Energy Agency's chief, Fatih Birol, went on the record saying Europe may have 6 weeks of jet fuel left if the strait doesn't reopen. This was not a side story. This was, arguably, the central catastrophe of the war. Now here's where this story gets truly remarkable. Around March 13th, something shifted. Iran didn't fully close the strait. Instead, the IRGC set up what maritime analysts started calling a toll booth. Here's how it worked. Ships that wanted to pass through had to apply through Iranian maritime authorities. The IRGC would vet the vessel, checking its nationality, its ownership, its cargo, and its crew. If the IRGC approved, the ship was rerouted away from the standard international shipping lanes down the middle of the strait, and instead redirected along a new path, hugging the Iranian coastline, running between the islands of Keshem and Larak. This is not a subtle distinction. The standard shipping lane runs through international waters. The new IRGC lane runs directly through what Iran considers its territorial waters. Passing through it means submitting to Iranian jurisdiction. It means Iranian gunboats right alongside you, and in some cases, it means paying a toll. Lloyd's List, one of the most respected maritime intelligence firms in the world, tracked at least 2 ships that paid tolls of an estimated $2 million per transit to pass through the IRGC route. Lloyd's List also noted that by late March, around 26 vessels had used this toll booth system. By comparison, 2,652 ships transited the strait in the same period in 2025. That's a collapse of roughly 99% of normal commercial traffic. An Iranian parliament member put it plainly, and I want to make sure you hear this quote clearly. Just as in other corridors, when goods pass through a country, duties are paid. The Strait of Hormuz is also a corridor. We ensure its security, and it is natural for ships and tankers to pay us duties. Iran was not hiding what it was doing. It was announcing it. It was writing to the International Maritime Organization to tell the world, ships from non-hostile countries could pass, but only if they comply with Iranian demands. And it was already trying to make this a formal demand in the preliminary peace negotiations. Shipping expert Renan at Lloyd's List was blunt. This is very unprecedented. This is not how things were moving prior to the war. Let's walk through the diplomatic timeline because the details here really matter. On April 8th, after weeks of combat, a 2-week ceasefire was brokered by Pakistan. The US and Iran agreed to halt hostilities. Part of the deal was that Iran would allow shipping to resume through the strait during the ceasefire window. The ceasefire is set to expire on April 21st. Almost immediately, it began unraveling. Israel kept bombing Lebanon. Iran accused the US and Israel of violating the ceasefire. By April 9th, ships were again being blocked. Iran paused Hormuz traffic over continued Israeli attacks in Lebanon. Then, on April 11th and 12th, U.S. Navy destroyers, the USS Michael Murphy and the USS Frank E. Peterson, made an unusual move. They transited the strait with their automatic identification system turned on, broadcasting their location publicly. Naval experts said this was deliberate, a demonstration that American warships could move through the strait whether Iran liked it or not. The IRGC confronted them directly. A radio transmission recorded by a civilian ship, later reported by the Wall Street Journal, captured the exchange. The IRGC saying, "This is the last warning. This is the last warning." The American ship responded that it was operating in accordance with international law. Iranian media reported that the American destroyers eventually turned around after the IRGC launched a drone in their direction. Then, there were peace talks in Islamabad. J.D. Vance, Steve Witkoff, and Jared Kushner on the American side, Iran's delegation on the other. Those talks reportedly collapsed. Iranian Foreign Minister Arachi posted that Iran was met with maximalism, shifting goalposts, and blockade. Trump then announced a new blockade, this time of Iranian ports specifically, a significant escalation. And then, this morning, April 17th, with a Lebanon ceasefire also taking hold, Iran's foreign minister posted the message that set off the chain of events we're analyzing right now. Let me read it carefully. In line with the ceasefire in Lebanon, the passage for all commercial vessels through Strait of Hormuz is declared completely open for the remaining period of ceasefire on the coordinated route as already announced by Ports and Maritime Organization of the Islamic Republic of Iran. 3 words buried in there that tell you everything. On the coordinated route. That is the toll booth. That is the IRGC route. That is the path that goes right along the Iranian coastline under direct Iranian supervision. Now let's look at how Trump responded and what the terms actually say. Trump posted in all caps celebrating the reopening. He called it the Strait of Iran, apparently not catching that this was either a gaffe or, from Iran's perspective, an accidental concession in branding. Iranian social media users ran with it immediately, joking about renaming it. Then Trump posted that Iran has agreed to never close the Strait of Hormuz again. It will no longer be used as a weapon against the world. Think about that. The strait was not closed before Trump and Netanyahu's campaign against Iran began. It was operating normally, 138 ships a day. So what Trump is describing as a major diplomatic achievement, getting Iran to agree not to close something it hadn't closed before he started the war, is, at minimum, a return to a status quo that he himself disrupted. Now, here are the conditions that Iran announced through its own state media and a social media account closely linked to Iran's parliamentary speaker and lead negotiator. Condition 1. Passage will take place along the route designated by Iran. Entry will be from the north of Larak Island and exit from the south. In Iran's own words, the Strait of Hormuz will be fully transferred to Iran's territorial waters. This is a historic, unprecedented, and enduring change in the Persian Gulf, ensuring Iran's sovereignty over the strait forever. Condition 2. Only commercial ships. And the determination of what counts as commercial is entirely up to Iran. Ships with connections to what Iran considers enemy countries will be excluded. Vessels will be required to pay tolls for security provision. Condition 3. All passage must be coordinated with the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy on a tanker-by-tanker basis. Ship owners, according to industry accounts, are already saying they're taking a wait-and-see approach. One oil industry analyst put it plainly: if the precondition is cooperation with the IRGC and Iranian authorities, and transiting only through Iranian-designated lanes, that's not a reopening in any real sense. Meanwhile, Trump's U.S. naval blockade of Iranian ports remains in effect, and Iran has said explicitly, if the blockade continues, they will consider it a violation of the ceasefire, and the strait will close again. Let's hear what the analysts are saying. Danny Citrinowicz, an Israeli foreign policy analyst specializing in Iran and the Middle East, put it this way: Iran demonstrated not only its ability to threaten the Strait of Hormuz, which it effectively controls, but also its willingness to keep it closed until conditions align with its interests, while refusing to yield to U.S. demands. He described Iran as not entering the next round from a position of weakness, and warned that the Hormuz card can and likely will once again be played. Even Ann Coulter, not exactly a progressive critic, posted, "Yay, the Strait of Hormuz was open before we began bombing Iran. It's open again. Everybody pretend this is a huge victory for Trump." Now let's zoom out further, because there's a historical context here that's essential. In 2015, the Obama administration, along with the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Russia, and China, negotiated the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, what people called the JCPOA, or the Iran nuclear deal. Under that agreement, multilateral inspections of Iranian nuclear facilities, hard limits on uranium enrichment verified by international inspectors, a long-term framework with built-in escalation mechanisms if Iran cheated. Trump pulled out of that deal in 2018, calling it the worst deal ever made. That decision restarted Iran's nuclear program and eventually led, through a chain of escalations, to where we are today. Now reports are circulating, from Axios, citing sources close to the negotiations, that the U.S. is considering giving Iran roughly $20 billion in exchange for Iran voluntarily agreeing to stop enriching uranium to weapons grade. Voluntarily. No international inspectors, no multilateral framework. Iran says, trust us. And the Strait of Hormuz, which under the JCPOA era was fully open under international law, is now to be managed under IRGC oversight along routes that Iran controls. Think about how that compares. The JCPOA, multilateral, verified, structured. The emerging framework, bilateral, voluntary, and the Strait of Hormuz now runs through what Iran is calling its sovereign territory. There's also the financial question. The Trump administration and MAGA media spent years claiming Obama gave $1.7 billion in cash to Iran on airplanes. What actually happened was more complicated. It was a settlement of a pre-revolutionary financial dispute through an international tribunal, paid in foreign currency because sanctions prevented dollar transfers. You can debate whether it was wise, but compare it to potentially $20 billion handed over in exchange for voluntary, unverified promises. Let's be clear about what is still at stake as of this moment. The ceasefire expires April 21st, 4 days from now. A second round of U.S.-Iran talks hasn't been formally scheduled. J.D. Vance has said the ball is in Iran's court. Iran's lead negotiator says America acted in bad faith in Islamabad. Europe reportedly has 6 weeks of jet fuel left if the strait doesn't genuinely reopen. Asian countries are rationing fuel. Global shipping insurance rates have increased by 4 to 6 times. Thousands of seafarers, around 20,000, are stranded. At least 7 have been confirmed killed in IRGC attacks on commercial vessels. Gulf states like Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Qatar, who Trump thanked in a post this morning, are watching what just happened. Iran, in the outcome of this war, claiming sovereignty over the world's most important shipping lane. These are Sunni Arab states with deep existential fear of Iranian regional dominance. If Iran has permanently locked in control of the transit route through the strait, the geopolitical balance of the entire Gulf has shifted. One analyst put it simply, the Gulf states are likely thinking, you just allowed Iran to control the Strait of Hormuz. Good luck expecting us to keep parking money in American real estate and treasuries. And France, the UK, and Portugal are already convening a conference to discuss a multinational naval mission to ensure freedom of navigation through the strait once the war ends. An implicit acknowledgement that the United States alone has not secured that freedom. Here are the facts as I've laid them out. The Strait of Hormuz was open before this war. It closed after the U.S.-Israeli campaign against Iran began. It is now conditionally, partially reopening, under routes controlled by the IRGC, with tolls, with vetting of every vessel on a case-by-case basis, through what Iran's own officials are describing as a historic transfer of sovereignty. Oil prices spiked. Global shipping collapsed. Thousands died. American missile stockpiles were depleted. U.S. bases in the Middle East were hit. Europe is short on jet fuel. And the emerging deal involves giving Iran potentially $20 billion for voluntary promises, compared to the multilateral framework with actual verification mechanisms that existed before Trump pulled out of it in 2018. Now, here is my opinion. You can disagree, and I want you to tell me in the comments. I think this is not a win. I think this is the definition of starting a fire, losing control of it, and then claiming credit for calling the fire department. The Strait of Hormuz is not freely open. It is operating under Iranian terms, Iranian routes, and Iranian gatekeeping. Whatever happens in the next round of negotiations, the baseline, the starting point, is worse for the United States and the global economy than it was before February 28th. The question of accountability for the people who ordered this war, for the civilian deaths, for the school children who were killed, is a separate conversation that I believe the international community will eventually have to have. But whatever you think of the politics, whatever you think of Trump or Iran or Netanyahu, look at the actual terms of what just happened. Read the primary sources. Compare where we started to where we are now. And then decide for yourself.